1 minute and 50 seconds. Yes, 1 minute and 50 seconds. That's the total length of this fourth song. And again, I received messages suggesting that I should do the in-depth of the happiest days of our lives together with the next one, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. But the more I dig into this album, the more I realize something. You know, there's an interesting fact about teachers, artists, especially writers and speakers. The better one masters a topic, the shorter, simpler, and more close to perfection their expression of it becomes. Think about legendary lines which forever remain in our memory. To be or not to be? That is the question. Or love your enemies. Or I have a dream. Think about Moonlight Sonata or Starry Night. And now I am looking at this 1 minute and 50-second piece of music. Short, simple, but so devastating. I am not sure if this song will make it on my playlist, but I will certainly remember it for the rest of my life, especially because of the effect it had on me during my first time hearing it. So at this point of my journey through the wall, I am inclined to think that I will treat each song one at a time, because there is so much to unpack. And now, let's see what makes this song so incredibly effective, so good. If you watched my first listen of the piece, well, I suppose you have, but if not, the link is up here. And yes, so many are still asking me in the comments if I am doing the entire album. Yes, I am doing the entire album, and I'm hoping to publish one song each week. And in fact, I've actually already recorded the first listen of each song on this album, and if you want access to them ahead of the scheduled release time, you can certainly do so by becoming a member on my Patreon or Ko-fi page. So, there, during my first listen, you will see that at first I didn't understand the first part of this song, the intro. The helicopter sound and the barking style voice. And then the title threw me off a little in a different direction at first too. But with a song like this, any misperceptions are quickly erased. It carries such a specific and powerful message, and the listener is compelled to travel with it. Also in this case, watching the movie helped to further enhance and expand what I had found within the music itself. So we are looking here at the well-known by now irony of Waters, the happiest days of our lives. Of course, these childhood days should be the happiest, when the child is conscious and can enjoy life, but before adolescence and adult responsibility hits with its problems and stresses. So the title indicates that the story is now in this phase of Pink's life, but doesn't necessarily describe the quality of it. But through the lyrics and the music of the song, Waters emphasizes that unfortunately, this period is often full of pain, insecurity, fear, confusion, mockery, which often begins the building of the wall in one's life. Now, in the movie, the songs are rearranged here. We have The Thin Ice, then When the Tigers Broke Free, which is not in the music album, then Goodbye Blue Sky, which in the album is song number 7, and only then The Happiest Days of Our Lives. But this is not a movie review. So I'm going to stick with the songs and their order as presented in the album. Though, of course, I did watch the movie and I will reference it whenever I think it is worthy of comment. So in the movie, there's a transition scene between Goodbye Blue Sky and The Happiest Days of Our Lives. Pink and his two buddies running down a hill with Pink laying a bullet on the railroad tracks. And then this song and Pink's imagination is triggered by that bullet's explosion, which, in the movie, replaces the helicopter sound we find on the album. But I think both of these indicate the same thing. Military. It so happens that I've been to Berlin a few times, and once, while there, I visited the Deutsches Technik Museum. There I was able to see up close one of the infamous train cars, designed for cattle transport, but which the Nazis used to carry people, human beings, to the concentration camps. Now, watching the Wall movie, I instantly recognized them. And here, these carts are full of people wearing hideous, faceless masks. Of course, the next song, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, along with Pink's face, which appears wearing the same faceless mask, speaks of the pupils, the children in the school. So in what way do these two equate? The German concentration camps and the school? Really? I think it's suggesting that both institutions equally voided the individuality of human beings. And in doing so, both institutions were actually guilty of killing human beings. Of course, the focus here is the school, and thus the masks. I'm not going to focus on the masks right now. That will come soon when I do the next song. Now, in the album, instead of a bullet explosion, we hear a helicopter. And I love how Waters not only integrates non-standard instrumental sounds, but also uses them to communicate critical elements. Like, he views the musicscape as a broad canvas. It's like he's making a movie without images. He's using all these sound worlds to build the images in our mind, in our imagination. Someone commented recently that he was a real wordsmith. I love that term. And I totally agree. But I'd also add that he is a real soundsmith. I've never actually used that term before, but I think it applies. And here, this helicopter implies military life, which, of course, should never have to enter a child's experience. So in the movie, it's the train. In the music, it's the helicopter, accompanied by a teacher's voice, ordering through a megaphone, military drill sergeant style. You, yes, you, stand still, laddie. And then the music hits us. I literally felt it hitting me hard. Drums and bass guitar, just like a rod hitting the child's back. This music, there's a place for everything. I mean, not merely a place where each thing can work, can fit, but a place where each thing has its moment to absolutely shine. Now, whether it's classical, rock, metal, I can even throw in country just to make my point. We've all heard plenty of music that it's fine, it works. We might even enjoy it for how it suits our mood, our personality, or our particular place in life. But then there are the musical moments where it is so perfectly appropriately chosen to suit the occasion. absolutely nothing else will do so eloquently, even if it's not the kind of music that we would choose to listen to for its own sake. I think of it like colors. We all have colors that aren't our favorite. Mine is orange. But I can't imagine a world without orange. There are times when only that color does the trick. Same with the music here. Nothing else could come even close to the effect this music has here, even though I'd never wake up in the morning and say, hey, I feel like listening to some music that sounds and feels like a beating. It's brilliantly suited to the intended expression. There's the rod, the fist, the striking impact from the drum, while the bass guitar gives an echo. This echo reminds me of a poem I learned as a child, which starts something like, I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but something like, drop a pebble in the water, just a moment and it's gone. But there's 100 ripples circling on and on and on. It's interesting to notice that it's the same reverb applied here in this song, which we heard in the previous song, and which gave us, back then, a very different effect, a different message. But now, just like a kaleidoscope changes with the slightest shift in position, so also here. We feel the message of this reverberating guitar gradually morph as Another Brick in the Wall, Part 1, elides into the happiest days of our lives, and the select few instrumental changes around this effect set up a different paradigm through which we view, feel, and hear these sounds. All it took was, first, the removal of the other guitar part that we heard in the previous song. Then, the entrance of the helicopter and drill sergeant. And then, the drums. And suddenly, we realize that we are now being told about the ever-extending effects of these experiences at this point in a child's life. And once the music is established here, we hear the bass descending even lower, leaving the D minor chord, walking down, down, even lower, past the dominant, to continue its beating on G minor, giving the impression that there is no limit to how low we might descend. In the movie, Pink walks out of the tunnel, and the following scene is a detailed depiction of the horrific train scene. We are shown exactly what is meant by adorning the children's faces with these grotesque masks, and how and why they ended up like that is the central topic of not only this, the happiest days of our lives, but also what comes next, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. This song itself is very clear, very eloquent, but layered with the movie scenes, it becomes even more expressive, more painful, more revolting. We are taken into the teacher's break room, and for a second, we see them drinking their coffee, or maybe English tea, whatever, reading the news. But then the bell rings, and we witness an incredible scene. They all stand up at once, do a last-minute check, arranging their garments, the tie, the chignon, checking for lints, etc., like a sergeant checking his uniform. And then, following the principal, all the teachers begin the march towards their respective classrooms. And of course, we could look even closer at all the details in the movie, like the walls on the corridor painted in white and red, just like Pink's future colors. I will come back to what's on the walls. I mean, the entire thing is about walls, right? And While the teachers, sergeants, are marching, Waters begins singing. When we grew up and went to school, there were certain teachers who would hurt the children any way they could. And listen to it. It's just like a kid who sees the senselessness of it all. It's sullen, belligerent, exactly the attitude that would drive these kinds of teachers mad. They'd beat harder. They'd yell closer. They'd turn the screws tighter. And this kid would only become more hardened in his views. It's the drums, the omnipotent aggression on every beat, the voice without any melodic likeness. It's more spoken, even defiantly muttered, than sung. And our anger rises. Notice also the echo on the first and last words, when and could. Pointing to the future, to the lasting impact of this behavior on the children's lives. And his voice, it's full of sarcasm and suppressed fury and anger. Then we are transported to the classroom and made to witness one of the most horrific crimes imaginable. The public execution of a child's soul. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Al Pacino's memorable speech in Scent of a Woman. If you remember, especially the line where he says, "And I say you are killing the very spirit this institution proclaims it instills." And then, there's nothing like the sight of an amputated spirit. And I have to say, believe me, I know this is true. We all know it's true. And that's what makes it so painful to watch here. But let's continue looking at both the music and the movie. The voice continues in the same manner, by pouring their derision upon anything we did, exposing every weakness, however carefully hidden by the kids. Now here, right after the last word, kids, we get to the critical moment, the quintessential point of the song, which is not in the melody, not in the instrumental music, not in the movie scenes, but in the background hysterical laughter at minute 116, which goes on and on for 5 full, painful seconds. Again, it's another moment when Waters chooses a non-musical sound to distill his message. And it's derision. That's the word. By pouring their derision upon anything we did. Now, the movie takes a break from the music at this point to allow more time to dwell on this element because it's such an important part of the music that's being communicated. Of course, in the album, that wouldn't make sense because a large gap without sound doesn't work unless there's something else going on. I noticed the same thing in Rammstein's Ohne dich. There's a silent moment in the video clip which doesn't exist in the music alone. It's a technique designed to emphasize the main point both by focusing ourselves on the visuals and by halting the flow of the music right when we are supposed to notice it most acutely. I listened to a BBC radio interview with Roger Waters back in 1979, where he talks about the wall. And when he came to this particular song, he emphasized that he was not trying to say that he accused all teachers, But just like in the lyrics, there were certain teachers. And I also think of some of the stories Vlad tells me from his years spent in communist schools, where it seems the attitude was identical to what is portrayed in this song. And Vlad, too, makes it a point to say that, of course, there were other teachers who tried to treat the kids normally, but they were in the minority. And we might ask, if not all the teachers behaved in that manner, why did Waters make such a big deal out of it? And why does the movie expand it even more with a large break in the middle of the song? It's an important question. And the answer is that although there were only certain teachers who would hurt the children any way they could, the effects of these actions on the children were, are, and forever will be impossible to evaluate. And the result, practically, the wall. Now, you remember from my first listen, this song made me incredibly angry. I'm a teacher. I love kids. I love to see them grow and develop, and I consider it a privilege and sacred responsibility to be able to be a part of that experience and to contribute to it in a positive way. Of course, I'm not the only influence in their lives. They have parents, family, friends, social circles of various kinds. But I do recognize the power I have for good or for evil, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I'm also incredibly fortunate because I never personally experienced any of the horrors portrayed in this song in my own childhood and developmental years. All of my teachers were massively positive influences in my life, and there are some whom I consider close friends and lifelong mentors even to this day. In spite of all that, I know that these kinds of evil people do exist in the educational system. Even though my own experience has not put me in their direct path, I know that they are too many, too powerful. So when I heard this song for the first time, of course, all my hatred and disgust towards this kind of so-called education and this kind of person, which is not even a mongrel, but an evil, horridly twisted imposter, I got hot about it. And I don't know a single true teacher, true educator, who wouldn't react the same. And so as much as I hate what this song has to say, I also value it at least as much, if not more, because it should be said. It should hit hard. It should make us angry. In this respect, I agree wholeheartedly with the message of this song, communicated both by the lyrics and the music. The movie, too, gives us an eloquent scene which could hardly get better. I'm not going to go into all the details because I'm focused on the musical message first, but I would like to point out a couple points, a couple noteworthy features. One having to do with the symbolism employed, and the other concerning the nature of education. First, a symbol. Out of all disciplines, the movie chose to show a math teacher. Why a math teacher? Well, the math teacher finds Pink's notebook of poems and pours his derision on him. The laddie reckons himself a poet, followed by the provoked laughter of the other children, his peers. If you can, try to remember that, because I will come back to this idea when I get to the in-depth analysis of the album's penultimate song, The Trial. By choosing a math teacher, the teacher's inability to understand Pink is emphasized. Who was Pink? Looks to me like he was one of the bleeding hearts and artists. But absolute rubbish, laddie. And then the same sergeant-style order, get on with your work, meaning, that's not your work, poetry. Of course it's not your work because it's nothing but rubbish. But this get on with your work brings me to my second point, the nature of education. Notice what the teacher does and what he says after striking pink. Repeat after me. An acre is the area of a rectangle whose length is 1 furlong and whose width is 1 chain. And thus the teacher returns to his systematic deadening of the senses through mindless repetition. It's the difference between education and indoctrination. Education is primarily the means by which, we could say, the natural good tendencies, abilities, and interests of a child are cultivated. It's the means by which the child learns how to choose and how to develop their own personal abilities. But on the other hand, indoctrination, which of course is an enemy of education, discourages personal opinions and individual development. Its aim is to make all individuals identical, illustrated here by mindless repetition. You even hear that in the music, the way the music is a sort of mindless, repetitive style. I'm reminded of my amazement when Vlad first told me that in the communist-era schools, they were never allowed to form personal opinions on literary works. Rather, they had to memorize, word for word, everything the teachers dictated about how that work should be understood. And their ability to reproduce that pre-packaged opinion is what made or broke their grade. Of course, this education versus indoctrination is a general principle which is applicable to any form of education, be it school, family, religious, career development, but it's especially critical in the formative stages of childhood. And then Waters takes yet another step, unveiling the hideous reality that this is actually a continuous process in a corrupt social cycle, a sick and hurtful means of hiding personal alienation. And of course, his means of doing so is a brilliant marriage of music and lyrics. And we see in the movie pictures. First, the lyrics. After presenting the undisputed dominating authority of these certain teachers, the next word is but. This simple little conjunction drastically changes our perspective of things. But in the town it was well known. It's genius. Here again, we hear the same reverb, echo, that we've heard previously. And yet, here, because of the tonal and melodic shifts in the music, we hear it differently even yet again. But in now sounds to our ears like the gossip spreading through the town from one mouth to the other, from one house to the other. And what was so well known? These psychopathic teachers were being abused by other psychopathic people. An endless cycle of victim becoming perpetrator through the formation of a personal wall with each one. This album is not about one person. I don't believe it was ever about one person. It's about every person. Now, as a teacher, an artist, a musician, it probably won't surprise you to hear me say that I believe art is crucial to the human experience. I believe it is essential. Just as vital to society as is science, technology, hand labor, like metal polisher, and the other commonly valued strands of education. But why? What value does it have that is not a luxury? Because yes, beauty, self-expression, sensitivity, and depth of understanding, these are important, especially for an elevated society, but they're not necessarily crucial, essential for survival. Which type of societies consider art as being not essential? Remember that memorable scene in Schindlers List. A group of Jewish people are getting ready to pass through the selection before going to the ghetto. One of them says, "You need to convince them you have a trade, something valuable to the war effort." And the other replies, "I'm a musician." "You're a musician?" "Yeah." "I'd find a good hiding place if I were you." And then the scene moves on to the line with one of them, baffled, asking the German officer, "Not essential? I think you misunderstand the meaning of the word." The officer replies, "No Blauschein," which was a blue sticker, the holy Blauschein proof that the carrier is an essential worker. "No Blauschein, sir. Stand over there. Move. Next." The man starts walking, and he's speaking to himself as he walks. "What do you mean, not essential? I teach history and literature. Since when is it not essential?" And in the movie, Stern picks him up just as he was to be loaded in a truck, gives him a fake work certificate, puts him back in the line, and when his turn comes, this time he says, "I'm a metal polisher." And of course, he gets the Blauschein. So why do I believe so strongly that art is essential? For survival, we must know ourselves. We must be able to understand who we really are and what our capacity as humans truly is. What are we capable of becoming? That is critical for survival. And that is what art does for us. It shows us the best and the worst of who we are. Here in the wall, we are getting a good, hard, honest look at what we, each of us, can become. We are made to witness and experience it, and to understand that this person could be any one of us. The process is not unnatural. It follows the natural course of certain tendencies of our human nature, and if we are both to avoid it on a personal level and combat it at a societal level, we have to know what it is. We have to understand that the enemy is not only out there somewhere, but it is within ourselves as well. It was always that way. It will always be that way. Waters is making us look at ourselves as individuals and at society as a whole. We are presented with a social system in which authority, shame, humiliation, and brutal force are the primary, or perhaps even singular, means employed to shape, to lead, and to build. But instead of building healthy relationships based on respect, friendship, and love, the result is walls. The wife abusing the husband, the teacher abusing the children. The wife, once a child brutalized by this same system, now hides behind her wall and can only produce bricks. Bricks to contribute to her husband's wall. And the teacher also, a spoke in this wheel of society's brutal machine, instead of breaking the curse, produces bricks to begin and build the children's walls. The underlying idea? Life is a play in which to hide one's personal alienation. Now the music shifts in this second half of the song. But in the town it was well known suddenly becomes a little more melodic. And as this phrase progresses, we hear several things happening. First, this melody. It starts by leaping higher, as if a piece of news is being called out. But in the town it was well known. The out loud declaration of the gossip that has only been whispered behind backs up to now. A sort of spiteful revelation about these teachers. There's a certain hint of pleasure we hear in the voice, a satisfaction, an enjoyment of having caught their weakness, followed by a gradual stepwise descent in the melody that goes on, gradually becoming deflated, recognizing that even though this is true about them, and maybe we enjoy the thought that they suffer too, but it doesn't change anything for us in our experience. You see how it's descending, and you hear, especially when you listen to the singer, the way he shapes it. It drives downward, but it also deflates downward. Not only does it function as a musical symbol of the downward descent of humanity, but it's also the embodiment of what these teachers must experience when, at the end of each day, they leave their thrones of power at school, their sphere of lordship, and trudge their way home. And the closer they get, the lower they feel, until at the end, they find themselves in the same debased position as those they destroyed just hours before. And we hear it in the sudden striking, again, it's a beating, the thrashing at the end, where it goes within inches of their lives. Another thing to notice happening throughout the course of this last phrase is how the tonality changes from D minor, gradually shifting, progressing, until the end of the song in F major. Now, we often think of major keys implying happier moods, more positive, but here it has a different effect. It does brighten the sound, but not to make us happy. Instead, to make us feel more hardness. Listen to the contrast of these two chords. Notice how the first one, although it does feel dark, gloomy, it is this very quality which makes it feel also subdued. And then I shift to the second one, and it feels sharper, harder, more adult. And that matches the narrative in the lyrics. The first half of the song was focused on the children and the gloomy outlook for them, while the second half conveys the final product, a hard, brutal character. Of course, the movie portrays that memorable dinner table scene with all its horrific details, and again, I'm not going to comment on it, all of it, such as the lighting in the scene and the disproportional shadows on the wall. There are so many details we could dive into if we were doing a movie examination. But I do want to point out two things which, though not specifically implied in the music, enhances our understanding of this song. First, one which I need to point out now but will expand on in the next song is the teacher being forced to eat some part of the food that he was not comfortable with. So just remember that for the next episode. Second, the Queen's portrait on the wall. Why would a family home have the Queen's portrait on the wall? Is that a British thing? And when I commented on it, Vlad replied with, maybe. And then he added, in his pocket is a portrait of the Queen. He says you will know what he's talking about there, and that I'll eventually find out. But I have my doubts about it being a British custom. It reminds me of people living under dictatorships who are required to display the dictator's image on their walls. And I suspect that this is hinting towards the dictatorship that we see later developing in the movie, and that this dictatorship style is yet another manifestation of what we have witnessed here in this song. It's a looking forward to the continuing cycle through society. Perhaps it's also suggesting that even the most civilized, the most developed societies are at constant risk of falling into this danger. In fact, do fall into this danger on some level, because, as we all know, Waters' own experience took place in English schools. And all this time, throughout this entire short song that is so packed with so many ideas, we hear in the music hit after hit after hit, and we recognize brick after brick after brick, all through the happiest days of our lives. I'll see you next time.